Welcome to Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. You can find us at LCARA.net, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Instagram. If you're enjoying the videos we're producing here at LCARA, please help our club out by hitting that subscribe button. Also, give us some feedback on our videos. Click the like button, share with anybody who may find it interesting, and be sure and hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified of the next video release.
Well, hello everybody for part 6 in the Abandoned Repeater Site series. And what we're bringing you today is moving the repeater at a temporary location that we were utilizing but didn't quite work out very well to the abandoned repeater site. And so here we picked it up at the old location. Now we're bringing it to the top of the mountain over here into the new shack with all of that wonderful electrical and so forth. And here we see KK4YUG and KY4CKP getting this fairly heavy piece of equipment, this rack, down off the truck bed there and onto the ground. It's already affixed to a dolly, but we're just lowering it to the ground here to make it easier to move over to the shack itself. So there they go. They got it tipped over, and you can see the strap on it already. Now we're going to move it over to the shack, and we're going to get it up and over the lip there. We didn't want to harm the metal insulated side, so we lifted it pretty good, got it up into the shack. Yours truly is behind the camera, so I wasn't doing a whole lot of manual labor. And now we get to set it down and get to figure out where in the shack we're going to place this. Now, we got a lot of room in this shack. It's 8 by 8, as some of you are probably aware if you've seen some of our other videos in the series. But we decided, since the tower is as you're facing the shack, it would be on the left-hand side. We decided to put the rack on the left-hand side, closest to the electrical panel that you see there. But there's also some outlets just behind the rack itself. So now we've got the rack, or the cabinet if you will, installed into the shack. Now if we open that up, we'll get a shot of what's in there currently. And this is basically a Bridgecom repeater. AC4DM, the president of our club, has used Bridgecom many times before for other repeaters. I think he's got a 220 and some others. But you can see we've got equipment already installed. And now what we're going to do is liberate some of the antennas that are on the existing tower. Now, none of these cables are marked. That's the big thick one. And then we've got several gray ones that we want to bring into the shack because we feel like we'll use one of those. We weren't quite sure which of those antennas, those cables coming off the antennas, was the one we wanted. Sadly, they weren't labeled. And so we had to do some testing ultimately to figure out which of those cables we're going to use. Also, we had to reinstall the duplexer, the battery, and so forth. So what we're looking at here is installing the duplexer. For those of you that are not familiar with duplexers, it's a way to ensure that you're isolating your send and receive signals as they go in and out of the repeater, so that one doesn't desense the radio or come in on a harmonic on your frequency that would hurt or degrade your signal. So that's what we're doing here, is hooking up those duplexers. At the moment, Chris is there screwing it into either the antenna side or the receive side, one of the two. So we're getting those all hooked up. We also have a battery in the very bottom. And we may have more batteries in this particular shack to create a little bank of batteries. And the future may hold other projects such as solar, so that we don't have to use the electrical coming in on the pole, or if the electrical is interrupted on the electrical service on the pole, we can still operate. AC4DM has to get a tool in his hand, so here he's got a drill with a hole saw built into it, and he drilled one side. He was able to poke the bit through, but couldn't go all the way through. So I'm finishing it on the outside portion, and now we have a hole. That's our first hole that we've actually put into the shack to get ready for some cables to be fed through. And then KK4YUG, who is also no stranger to tools, is taking a piece of PVC and a collar, and he's going to cut that collar in two. and we're going to leave it affixed on one side of the PVC like you see here, but we're going to cut about half of it off. And what we're going to do in the next little snippet here is we're going to take the rest of that collar and we're going to put it on the other side, but we have to fit it through the hole. So KK4YUG is going to take his trusty hacksaw and he's going to make short work of this collar and cut it, like I said, roughly in two in this particular case. So you can see he's no stranger to a hacksaw. And then coming up, we will begin the process of measuring the length of the actual PVC that's going to go through the hole here in just a moment. Man, he's almost through that thing. Couple of more slides, and we're through. All right, so now you can see the PVC itself is sticking out through the inside to the outside. We're marking it to see where the actual outside begins, and now we're going to cut about an inch past that because we want to make sure that there's room for the collar. The other half that Steve just sawed off, we want to make sure that there's enough PVC pipe for there so that we can glue it on. This is going to give us a really nice ingress point into the shack for our cables, and it won't pop out because we have the collars on both sides. I think it's a really nifty way to make this happen. And here we're fixing the purple agent first, and then we'll come along and put the glue on and put the other side. So what I've done is I've already put the collar in from the outside through. He's gluing up the inside portion. He's going to put the other half of the collar on. And as they like to say in Great Britain, Bob's your uncle. We've got a nice pass-through where, again, it's not going to fall out. It protects the shack itself from water intrusion. We'll probably go back also and maybe put some sealant around the outside just to make sure that there's no intrusion. But now we've got a place for cables to come through. So we liberated some cables off the existing tower. Now this is just rough testing. We didn't think we were going to be able to hook everything up and just get on the air automatically. I mean, maybe some of us, me, had high hopes that we could do that, but we didn't quite know what some of these cables were for. Since the shack was last used, none of these are marked, so we were going to have to run some tests to see which of these cables. So we brought 3 in that had been used in the old green shack there you see to Steve's right, and we thought, well, we'll run some tests, some SWR tests, and see if we can figure out what's going on. So AC4DM pulls out one of his Go boxes, and sure enough, he's got his test equipment in there, and you can see we've got the black cable connected at the moment, the thicker of them, and we're going to test the SWR in this guy and see if it's a 2 meter or a 70 centimeter or a 220, because we were also using 220 to link some of the stations together in the old days. So you can see he's on 120 right now, and we've got pretty high SWR, down around 120, let's put it that way. And he's going to move it up to about 140 something, I think. And on this black cable, we could get it down to about 2.120, somewhere in that ballpark for SWR. Now that's not the end of the world. You can make that work. There are devices that can make your radio even happier that you can put in line, which I'll show you in just a few minutes. But again, we're testing all the cables just to see how they would work and what frequencies they seem to be, which frequencies the cables that are connected to an antenna are going to work the best. So you can see here we're up around the 220 side of things, 1 1/4. So just seeing. That one didn't test really well, so I'm not quite sure which frequency this one was actually best on. Let's see if this little snippet shows us. As I remember it, I don't remember we actually figured out which one this one was good for. So you can see he's running up to about 2 meters, and we're still up around, what are we there, about 3, 4, somewhere in that ballpark. Not great. Certainly not as good as the black one we had a little while ago. This is another reason why you want an antenna analyzer, folks. And then here we switched frequencies, or we switched cables, excuse me, and you can see we've got it down to 1.5-ish. Now that's at 147. Our repeater's at, this one's at 145, 150, but you know, it's getting down in the ballpark, and it was definitely lower than the black one. So we have a cable connected to an antenna that appears to be more resonant than the first 2 tests. And again, a great reason to have an MFJ antenna analyzer. We could have done this with a Nano. We could have done this with a Rig runner. We could have done this with a Rig Master, I should say. There's a lot of these devices out there, but the good old standby with the nice little needles, those meters there in the bottom, plus your digital display, just do a wonderful trick here trying to figure out SWR. Now, as we move on, we hooked up a dummy load to this last gray cable that we tested. We thought, well, let's test out the repeater. Let's make sure it'll ID and so forth. Well, when we started running some tests, it was not IDing. And Don knew it wasn't going to, because one of the reasons we're moving it to this new site is at the site where it was, which ended up being temporary, we got a bunch of interference. And the interference was just playing havoc with the repeater. And Don drove nearby so that we could try to get in there edgewise, because it kept locking up due to the repeater being unlocked and left open for over 3 minutes. And he used DTMF codes, and he turned off the transmitting side. Well, that means since he turned off the transmit side, we're going to have to go into the CAT controller, and we're going to have to turn some things on. So the CAT controller down at the bottom there helps us actually regulate what's going into the repeater. It'll do time IDs. It'll also call out the repeater ID and other things. And many of you that have been in the hobby for a while, you've probably seen a number of these CAT controllers. This is a 300DX. Don's got documentation on at least 5 different models that I've seen in his notebook. And so we're going to have to open this guy up and program it to turn the allowance of transmitting back on, because we had turned it off so it wouldn't harm the repeater, what we had hoped. So at this point, we're kind of stymied. We're going to have to open up the CAT controller and turn on pin 8. So again, if you're not familiar with CAT controllers, don't worry about it, but you do have to use some terminal software. For us IT guys, like my brother and myself and several other guys in the club, we used to do this with serial cables, just straight up 9 pins or 25 pin cables. Today, most laptops do not come with those. So you're typically going to use a 9 pin to USB type connection into the laptop, USB into the laptop, serial into the CAT controller, and you use these COM programs that ship with many of these controllers to program them. And one of the things we have to do was to turn on the transmit side of it again, which we did. And at this point, we're double checking things, got everything turned back on, and what did we find, folks? Well, believe me, on a trip like this, we wanted everything to work 100%, but what we found was the repeater was not putting out a signal. It wasn't transmitting. Well, technically it was transmitting, but the power out, we could hardly measure. If you were standing right next to it, no problem. But here we're double checking our work. He's also mentoring me to show me how to program the CAT controller, and we're just double checking all of our work to say, well, did we do something wrong? Come to find out, when we hooked up a power meter in line on the antenna, it wasn't moving the needle at all. And that's coming up here in this next little bit, and we'll close out the video. So in the next video, we got to figure out what's wrong with the repeater. We've also got some additional brushwork, guy line maintenance, all of that good stuff. So here we're looking at the meter, and we're transmitting, but notice that needle on the left is not moving at all. So we were unable to communicate with anybody out in the community. Well, that'll be it for part 6 here. We've got the rack installed, we've got the repeater there, but we're having some issues. Got to troubleshoot those, which is very common. For KY4BDP and Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association, thanks for coming along with this series, and we'll see you down the road, and hopefully we'll get this repeater working again very soon. 73s.